All right, chapter 18. The beginning of this vision takes place in chapter 17. We have this vision of the woman on her beast, right? So chapter 17 introduces her. Chapter 18 and 19 will conclude this vision. So it's a 3-chapter vision that are interconnected to each other. At the end of 17 and 17:16 in particular, we saw that the woman was in ruin. She's left naked, eaten, and burned with fire. And so in case you forgot what 17:16 said, that's essentially what it says. Chapter 18 through the first 10 chapters of 19 serves as theological reflection. All right, so this is an angel explaining what the ruin of Babylon means. All right, and so theological reflection in these 2 chapters, followed by a destruction at the very end. You're starver. All right, this is our life right now. So, so what we're going to have is almost a chiastic structure in these verses. So the first is a call to come out. Wow. Come out. Followed by the laments over Babylon. Lastly, it's a call to rejoice. And so I think, I don't know if I have it written down, Jeremiah or Ezekiel. No, I think it's Jeremiah. I don't have it written down. I think Jeremiah has a something very similar, and I forget where in Jeremiah, so just somewhere in Jeremiah. What's that? What's that? Yeah, I think Jeremiah 51. Yeah, I think that sounds right. I'm surprised I didn't write it down. But Jeremiah, I assume in 51, we're going to assume 50. Yeah, 51. I have 51, 48. So 48 and 49. So the Jeremiah 51 kind of serves as the background to this, and this first part and this last part fits a lot with Jeremiah 51. And so it's kind of the overall structure of chapters 18 through 19, and John uses it to kind of communicate what he's doing here. So, all right, if someone wants to read verses 1 through 8, we will jump in.
After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, and she has become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit, and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, and that you may not receive of her plagues. For her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back even as she has paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup in which she was mixed twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am not a widow, and will never see mourning. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for the Lord God who judges her is strong.
All right. So the scene opens up with another angel coming from heaven. It says that this angel illuminates by his splendor or his glory, as the NASB says there. This actually is similar to Ezekiel 43:2. In Ezekiel 43:2, Ezekiel sees the glory of God coming from the east and radiating throughout the land. So this seems to be in the back of John's mind as he's writing this, which does leave us with the question, who is this angel that radiates with glory? The church, okay.
Angels not normally do that?
To the extent that it fills the whole earth with its glory, fills the land, right?
Angel of the Lord Jesus.
Oh,
Yeah, so it does maybe sound something akin to the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. Now, the glory could be a reflection of God's glory, maybe, but the fact that it's doing it so much, it seems to be something a little bit different. So splendor definitely represents God's glory if it's not a reflection of it. Additionally, this angel is given great authority. And so maybe, I put a question mark here, maybe this angel represents Christ, question mark. So sometimes Jesus is called an angel because the word angel just means messenger. And so sometimes he does have that title, not always, a lot of times not, because Jesus is greater than the angels. And so we do have to kind of wrestle with that some.
So does angel have like a by meaning?
I mean, angel just means messenger.
So they call all of the hosts of heaven angels then? Because they're not really all messengers.
Sorry, what are you asking?
So is there another name for angels that we would use?
I mean, there's a bunch of Old Testament names that we come across, like cherubim, seraphim, classes of angels, but they're not really explained too much. New Testament, it's all one word.
When it's only one, it's kind of unusual because it seems like anytime it has been a group. And then this makes me wonder about Gabriel and Michael because you hardly ever hear them, see them.
Right. I mean, you see Michael in chapter 12 of Revelation, specifically named. And then he's also specifically named in Daniel. And then Gabriel is really only in Luke. Chapters 1 and 2. More 1 than 2. Where I'm at in general with angelology is we don't know enough. So we can just, for sure, the word in Greek means messenger. And so every once in a while you'll see somebody say, we sent a messenger, and the word is angels. So we sent an angel. It's kind of weird. So in our minds and how we hear it, so we translate it messenger when it pops up like that. I mean, one of the jobs of angels is to be messengers. And this person is going to deliver a message, right? Raises a loud voice, a mighty voice, and says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Right? So yeah, he has a message. No, I mean, yeah. So, anyway, if it is Christ, fine. I mean, it doesn't really change anything. The purpose of the angel is he has a message to declare. So, I'm just throwing out there that this might be Jesus saying this. So, but Jesus is going to appear later on in the vision, not as an angel, and so we got to wrestle with that too. So, but Jesus is also God, so I mean, he could be in two places, but usually we don't see that in the Son so much as the Father. So we got lots of things we got to kind of wrestle with from time to time. All right. So anyway, so we got to figure out how can this angel have glory that inhabits the whole earth, right? Angels have some kind of glory more than humans, but usually it doesn't radiate throughout the whole earth. So, all right. Verses 2-3, we're told that he raises a loud and mighty voice. And again, this probably is a symbol of authority. The angel has authority to declare this. And he's not just telling us what has happened, but in some way is ushering in the judgment. So he's not just saying this is already taken place, but this is what's happening. And his message is simple. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. This is the third time that this has been said. So I think in 14... end of chapter 14 it says it, and then I think earlier in chapter 17 it said it. So, this is their time that's taking place. 14:8 is what it says. First announced 14:8. There you go. Found the verse. I had it written down this time. So, it also is alluding to Isaiah 21:9, which first speaks of Babylon's demise. What we have in this voice is the assurance of the fall of Babylon. So how can we know that this truly happens? Because it's happened before. And so I think it's safe to say that it's going to happen again. Anytime economic centers of the world become wicked in their ways, they are Babylon. And anytime the economic centers become overly powerful, they are threatened with collapse. Additionally, there's this final religious economic system that will fall at the very end, which seems to be hinted at in this verse. Verse 2 explains why the fall is certain. And again, it comes from that Isaiah 21:9. So in Isaiah 21:9, Isaiah explains why Babylon would fall, and it's because of their idols that had crushed her in Isaiah. Guys, your idols have crushed you. The Revelation Babylon slightly different. It says they become a place of demons and a haunt for impure spirits, birds, and animals. Did you have animals in yours? That'd be verse 2, the second part of it. Yeah, so I got to go figure out what's up with that. So, yes. Yeah, she didn't read it in NASB, and so I was like, oh, wait a second, that's weird. Interesting. Do you have a note at the bottom?
Greek is unclean, evil,
Okay.
unclean bird.
So what it probably is so the problem with the NIV, so NASB is great because if they add words, they put it in italics so that you know that they have to supply. So in Greek, oh gosh, I don't even know how to explain this. I get to talk about English for a second. I saw this week and I thought it was awesome.
Did you spell it wrong in English, so they can make you teach how to write 20 times or what?
All right, here you go. Ready? This is a grammatically correct sentence. Buffalo, 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 buffalo. It's a verb too. All right, so location. Buffalo from Buffalo. Buffalo. Buffalo from Buffalo. It's a grammatically correct sentence in English. So a Russian pointed this out at one point in time, and it was, and you could keep going because it can happen several times. Anyway, because it could be a verbal at some point in time, right? And so we can add other things. So you can extend that one out forever. So anyway, this is why it's hard sometimes to explain things of how other languages work. So in the Greek, you can use a word. And so I think what NASB has done is it's used that word and said it's explaining what type of birds. Where the NIV has said, no, it's including this idea of unclean animals. And so in the NASB, anytime they have to supply words, they will use italics. I don't know if you see any italics. It doesn't have italics there, but like here, made.
Right.
So anytime it has to supply words, which sometimes happens in Greek, you have to supply the meaning in English when you're translating. It will do that. But NIV doesn't do that. So I'm assuming that's what's happened. I'd have to take a closer look, but that'd be my assumption. So anyway, I thought that was awesome. I came across my feed the other day. I was like, yes. Okay. Just to kind of explain that our language is nuts at times. What's that? Yeah. So this is a location, Buffalo. Buffalo is an animal. So buffalo from buffalo. But buffalo is also a verb, meaning to like push over or to something to exit. So these buffalo from buffalo are pushing over other buffalo from buffalo. Buffalo, 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 buffalo. Anyway, okay, moving on. Okay, so yeah, so I have back to this. Sorry. All right, so why is Babylon's fall certain? Because they become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for impure spirits, and birds, and we're going to supply animals. So what is he trying to say through that? Essentially the same thing that Isaiah 21:9 saying, she has become idolatrous. So demons, especially in first century Jewish thought, demons were idols or idols were demonic. And then all these unclean ideas, impure spirits, unclean birds, unclean animals. It is this idea of idolatry as well. So this is why. So why does Babylon's fall certain? Because she is idolatrous. Okay, that's what's being communicated with this. Lastly, verse 3 speaks of her influence over the entire world, and we're going to talk about them in greater detail in the next section of this chapter. So we have laments by the kings and merchants. They're mourning her passing, and these are people that we're told have committed adultery with her and grew rich by her excesses. And so adultery, again, this has been a theme since chapter 17, but adultery is idolatry. This is very much an Old Testament concept where Israel, when they followed after the idols, they were committing adultery against God. So,
Wasn't that the picture of in one of the Old Testament books where he married the
Hosea. My wife's confirming that for me. So Hosea, yeah. What's the Francine River book? Yeah, Redeeming Love. Yeah, so Hosea marries a prostitute as a symbol of God's relationship with Israel. She goes back to her prostituting ways, and Hosea goes and takes her and redeems her. And it's God saying, this is how you've been to me, and this is what I've been to you. So, all right, verse 4 through 5 is really a new section, but I put them together because why not? And what we have is a new voice. So the first mighty angel kind of goes into the background, and then this new voice pretty much takes on from verse 4 all the way through really, I think, 9:10 or 19:10. So this voice is going to speak, and this is the theological reflection to the fall of Babylon. The voice speaks, Jeremiah 51:45. Here we go. That's that 51 passage. This is what it's patterned off. Jeremiah 51 is a passage discussing the fall of Babylon because of her idolatry. And in verse 45, God tells his people to flee the city so that they do not get caught up in its destruction. And that's exactly what happens in verses 4 through 5, right? Come out, so that you are not judged with her judgments, right? And he gives two reasons. So why should Christians leave Babylon? Yeah. So we do not participate in her sins is the first thing. So don't get caught up in her idolatry. And the second reason is, so we don't get judged with her judgment, right? Now this is something important to understand. When we are called to come out, it's not a call to be isolated. Okay, so we should not necessarily do what some religious groups have done. Such as the Amish, isolating themselves completely, or for the most part as completely as they can. That's not what we're called to do. Somehow we are still called to be ambassadors in this world for Christ, as I think is that 2 Corinthians 4 or 5 says. And so we still are called to be a part of the world, but not of the world. And so this call to come out is a call to be separated from the spiritual aspects that are here. Additionally, this call to not be judged, I think, can reflect somewhat on Jesus' call to the Christians in the Olivet Discourse when he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. He says, come out of her so that you don't get killed, right? Flee so you don't die. And they did. Like, we have no historical references to any Christians dying during the siege of Jerusalem in AD 70. So same thing. Christians come out of Babylon, so you do not fall with her. Verse 5 does speak again to the vastness of her sins. They're piled up to heaven, and God is remembering her crimes. And I think, again, we can go back to that in Revelation 6.
You think he kept saying Babylon because he didn't want to say Rome?
For sure.
Just didn't want to get killed for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Everybody will know what I'm talking
well, I mean, yeah, she sits on 7 hills, right? Like, I mean, right there, that right away, everyone would have known exactly what he's saying. So, but it's not, I guess it's not defamation if you don't actually use the name. So, yeah, I had an interesting conversation with somebody, and they said they can't use the word narcissism, otherwise they would have defamation, but they can say narcissistic tendencies, and it's not defamation. So, so anyway, maybe the same thing. Babylon, just to make sure it's clear, but everybody knows what he's talking about. So for sure, he's talking about Rome in particular. Verses 6 through 7, we come back to this idea that the judgment fits the crime. So the destruction of Babylon is fitting the crime of what she has done. So Babylon's going to receive what is dealt out to her, right? Pour her a cup of her own cup, due to her what she has done. Give back to her as she has given. One of the interesting things is this word double. Okay, so she has killed the saints, therefore she will be killed in like. Interesting is this word double. The word can mean times 2. Or it can mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. So I give you this pen, and we produce a reproduction of the same pen, right? So it can be this idea. So she's already poured out her cup. Well, we're going to make a cup just like it and pour out on her. So it can have that idea of duplicates. And so we have to kind of decide which one. I don't know that really matters in the end. Although if we do fit this idea of punishment fitting the crime, duplicate is a better idea. And so you just got to kind of decide. Again, I don't think it matters. She's judged. I think the idea, though, is that the judgment is just. And that I think is an important concept throughout the Bible. And so throughout this, we see that God is sovereign and he punishes sin appropriately. And because he is in Lord, he can do this. Verse 7 speaks of the attitude of Babylon. All right, she sits there and boasts, I am a queen, I am not a widow, I will not mourn. This actually is patterned after Isaiah 47. The pride of spiritual Babylon is patterned after the pride of the real Babylon of Isaiah's day. The confidence of the city is a form of self-idolization. And so we need to recognize that pride in self is self-idolization, and something that John's already talked about to the Laodiceans, right? You say that you're rich, but you're poor, right? And he's saying you guys are proud of your situation, but you are nothing in reality. And so we need to be careful of our own pride at times. And then lastly, verse 8 says, in one day all this stuff happens, which is really just speaking of the suddenness of its fall. And I think if we look back in history, we can see the suddenness of economic collapses, right? So how many people predicted Black Tuesday to happen during the Great Depression? I mean, most people didn't have a clue, and it was sudden. What's that? I wasn't there either. I don't think anyone in this room was there. Oh, you were there. Okay. You don't remember it. So, yeah, I mean, no one knew. And I think even some of the other stuff we've seen in recent times, like the sudden collapses of economies, we're not really expecting it all the time. And I think that's what we kind of see here is the suddenness of her fall, and we need to recognize it. So what is left is death, mourning, and famine. And these are part of those plagues that God is doing. And we see throughout it all, God is supreme. So for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. Or I really liked how the NASB said that. Is powerful at the end. Yeah. All right. So what can we learn?
Be careful of your pride.
Okay. God is over all. Yeah, we're definitely going to see in these chapters the sovereignty of God. What?
We're impressed by Rebecca.
Oh, yeah.
Just walk in and
I actually went along the lines of Rebecca's. I did a little bit differently. I said Babylon's security is nothing but a facade. Only God provides true security in this world. And so when you're super prideful about yourself, you tend to find security within that pride. But that pride doesn't provide actual security. So while you may feel like you're secure, it's a fake. It's false. Only God can provide true security in this world.
I only got it from your line.
Yeah, the one line. She listened to that one part. So, but it's I think it's the key idea throughout it all. All right. The next section points out the responses of those closely associated with Babylon. There are three types of mourners. The first and the last mourners will repeat the same ideas. So what they say is very similar, just with different words, but they're saying the same things. The second set of mourners is the longest and serves as the primary teaching of the passage. The passage does contain a lot of allusions to Ezekiel 26, 16 through 18. And so we do need to keep in mind that Ezekiel 26 talks about the judgment of Tyre, which is a city north of Israel. I didn't bring my map forwards, but so Tyre is so here's Israel down here. Tyre is a city on the coast right here. It's one of the It's a weird relationship with Israel in the Old Testament. Sometimes they were in good relationships. A lot of times they weren't. And so near the end, they were not. And Ezekiel is giving judgment to them because of their bad relationships at that time. And talks about the fall of it. So Babylon of Revelation, like Tyre, is a hub of economic success. And so when Tyre falls, a lot of people are going to be sad. And so John is going to do the same thing in these chapters and say when Babylon falls, there's a lot of people that are going to be devastated by it. So verses 9 through 19.
When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxuries, seething both of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, Woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In what hour your doom has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, and fine flour and fruit, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and human beings sold as slaves. They will say, the fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment. They will weep and mourn and cry out, Woe, woe to you, great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold and precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. Every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors and all who earn their living from the sea, will stand far off, When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, was there ever a city like this great city? They will throw dust on their heads and with weeping and mourning cry out, woe, woe to you, great city, for all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she had been brought to ruin.
All right. So the people actually speaking this is still the angel. All right. So yeah, Ezekiel 26 background. So we have the same voice that started talking in verse 4. Again, it's going to go for quite a while here. And so this voice from heaven is telling John what is happening. So theological reflection on this is still in mind. The first set that's talked about are the kings of the earth who participated in adultery. And what does adultery equal again? Idolatry, okay? What we might have here in the back of their minds is the Roman guilds playing a factor again. And so one of the things we need to keep in mind is how Roman guilds worked. A lot of Roman guilds, if you were a part of a trade, you had to be a part of the guild. If you weren't a part of the guild, you were not going to be able to work in the city. And so you had to participate. To be a part of a guild, though, also meant that you participated in the idol worship of that guild. So each guild had their own idols that they would celebrate, their own days of worship for that idol. And so if you wanted to be a part of that guild, you had to participate. And so there's economic tied to idolatry. Okay? And so all this success, I think, is in the back of these minds. And so these kings participate in idolatry because they are wanting the economic success that comes with it. Okay? So when Babylon falls, it says that they weep and they mourn for several reasons. What are some of those reasons? Why would they be terrified?
They lost all their luxuries.
Yeah.
Like us losing AC.
Yep. Yes.
I'd be terrified.
Yeah, my wife made me turn on the air last night, so.
Turn the air on for like 2 months.
2 months?
Yeah,
Oh my,
during the daytime.
that's terrible. No. I say last night I turned on our room's air conditioner, not the rest.
Allergies if we leave the windows open, we're all miserable.
Oh, okay. See, I don't really have that. Nehemiah is the only one with allergies, so he can suffer. So, all right. What's another reason? Why else would they? That's the second reason I have. That's the Wow, we did have a youth minister here who wouldn't turn on the heat in the wintertime, and his wife had to open the stove. Right, that's a sacrifice. So, what's the other? Why else would they be terrified at Babylon's destruction? But so loss of economic security. I think we saw that. What else? It's not necessarily said in it, but what do you think? If you saw something destroyed, why would you, if you were closest? So if my best friend, and I'm always hanging out with them, we're doing business together. Yeah. I think there's some of this, is there imminent judgment coming my way? I just associate, I was with Babylon over and over again. She's destroyed. What does that mean for me? I think that's in their mind. You're right. And then the loss of their own economic security. So where do they stand during all this? Far off. I said aloof. They are staying as far back as possible, right? We don't want to even touch that right now. So, and that's interesting that they're willing to be buddies until it meant something harmful for them. And all three of these groups will have that same idea. Yeah. Also, it says 1 hour. That's probably, again, highlighting the suddenness of the destruction that we talked about just a little bit before. Also hints at Daniel 4. Daniel 4 has said something very similar. Verse 11 through 13 begins the second group of people, which are the merchants of the earth. They are mourning, and why are they mourning?
Because they lost all their resources.
No, not their resources. Yeah, they lost their bases, right? Their base. So they have a bunch of resources, but they have no one to buy it. So it's supply and demand here, right? So they have the supply, but is there a demand?
Nope.
Right. So So the demand is gone. Yeah. They can afford it. Yeah. Well, so there's not really, I mean, so what should cost $100 is now 50 cents, right? Because there's just, they lost those people. So yeah, they've lost their economic basis. They have no buyers. And then what we have in verses 12 to 13 is a list of those stuff. It's loosely based on Ezekiel 27. A lot of what Ezekiel 27 is included, but there is a lot of differences. And probably what the differences are is basically what was luxury items in Ezekiel's day isn't necessarily luxury items today, right? And we see that. Every house back in the 50s and 60s had shag carpet. That was luxury, right? You did not like it. It's kind of coming back. So yeah, now we want a hardwood floor, right? It covered up all the hardwood floors at one point in time, but now we pull it up and we're like, why did they do that? Let's clean it up. Let's fix it, you know? So what was luxury in one generation is not in the next. And so I think that's the differences. So these are all luxury items that John is quoting here. Now, some things are always luxurious: precious stones, silver, gold. So I think those things are timeless, but some of the other things, not so much. Verse 14 to 15 continues to bemoan the further loss of income. What's interesting is in the Greek, it's an alliteration in verse 14, and both words mean shiny things. So all your luxury and splendor. That's an alliteration that means shining things. Both can be translated that way. Shiny things, shiny things. You've lost all your shiny things, okay? And so here's what I think we need to recognize is that Babylon's splendor looked good, but it was a false splendor or a false glory. All right? Now, we do definitely need to compare this to the new city that is coming, and we're going to read about in chapter 21 when we get there someday. And its splendor is eternal compared to Babylon's false splendor. What's that? Someday. These merchants too, they stand afar, right? Well, they have all these goods, but they don't bring them into Babylon because they don't want to be caught up in that destruction. Verses 16 through 17, cries. Sorry, where am I? This is the cry of the merchants. They note that she had important attire: fine linen, purple, scarlet, glittering of gold, precious stones, and pearls. And again, this is definitely going to be going back to what was said in chapter 17 about the woman, but also very similar to the garments worn by the high priest of Israel. And so everything that's mentioned there, the high priest would have worn. And so we need to recognize that her economic success is on the back of idolatry.
Did you watch King Charles?
No, I was busy during that time. Yeah.
So I guess that's what they view as luxury.
I mean, it's just a regalia for Charles. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's just regalia that emphasizes his authority. So, I mean, Elizabeth had to wear a lot of the same stuff. Sorry, Juan?
One that will be easily taken over and people will be like, well, that's all done.
Yeah. Again, I also think we're alluding to the New Jerusalem, which is adorned in gold, precious stones, and pearls, and we'll see that when we get to chapter 21. All right, verse 17 through 19, we get the last group. These are the sea captains. They would have been another wealthy and powerful group. If you look at the Mediterranean world, what do you notice about it? Lots of water, right? And so the seas are important. If you had a ship, you could be powerful money-wise and politically wise. And so the sea captains are a class in and of themselves. They are wealthy and powerful. Where do they stand?
Nowhere, probably, because the ocean's all gone.
They stood from a distance. And their words are interesting. They say, is there anyone as great and as mighty as this city? Is anyone great and as mighty? And I think this is interesting. That word great, usually in Revelation, is attributed to God, except for the discussion on Babylon. And only with Babylon did they say that word great with her. And I think what we have here is this understanding of this message that's been prevalent throughout Revelation that is definitely being highlighted here. And that's this: only God is worthy of honor and glory. And when we give it to others, it's hubris on our part. All right, and I think that's what Revelation is, one of the messages that it's trying to communicate to us. All right, be careful who you're giving glory and honor to. God alone is worthy of it. And I think if we go back to the throne scene, chapter 4 and 5, we see that highlighted heavily there. Verse 19, it says that they throw dust on their heads. There's two reasons why people would throw dust on their heads. First is a sign of repentance. Do we think that the sea captains are repentant?
No, they're grieving.
Yeah, they're grieving, and that's usually the second sign, a sign of mourning. So, all right. What can we learn from 9 through 19?
It says something about being careful of. Yeah, who you give glory to.
Yep.
Who was eaten by worms?
What's that?
Who was, that was eaten
Jen-
by worms in Acts?
Herod.
Because he accepted
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Which I think Josephus tells us about that even more. It's interesting. It's fascinating what Josephus has to say about that. So they all agree that this was not. He did something wrong. So
Also, yeah.
And then Nebuchadnezzar was turned into the hairy character.
yeah. Destruction come fast. Yep. I think the same message earlier is being played out again. I said security in earthly systems is nothing but false hope, and only God provides true security. And I think throughout this vision, that's kind of what's being highlighted. If you want to not have to worry about your money, trust God, right? If you're trusting in other things, you're trying to get rich quick. If you're trying to go to idolatry in order to find security there, it's just not going to do what you think it needs to do. So, we didn't get through 18. Let's see here. I only got 2 pages. Let's do it. All right. 20 through 24. Just 4 verses here.
Rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice, saints and apostles and prophets. God has judged her for the way she treated you. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No workman of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's great men. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of the saints, and of all who have been killed on the earth.
All right. So a lot of this, again, comes from Jeremiah 51, especially verse 48. God's people are called to rejoice over the judgment of Babylon, which is our theme here. And then Jeremiah 51:49 explains why Babylon is to be judged, which is really the points of verses 23 through 24. Okay. So John provides different reasons than Jeremiah, but we can see the connection between these two passages. So in verse 20, again, we have the same voice that's continuing to speak. He's giving theological reflection on the destruction of Babylon. And he calls for Christians to rejoice at Babylon's judgment. Okay? And he gives 3 names for the people of God, and they all are meaning the same thing. He says, all you heavens, all you people of God, all you apostles and prophets, right? And it's communicating the same concept. God's people are to rejoice. Why? Why do we rejoice?
great harlot has been destroyed.
Okay. Yeah, justice, and in particular, he says he judged her with the judgment she did, right? And so how she treated the Christians is how she's treated. So back in Revelation 6, I started to bring this up earlier, but Revelation 6, the question of the martyrs was what? How long? And I think we're coming back to that answer, right? Like, not only how long, soon, coming, but how she treated you, she will be treated. And we still have this idea in there that the judgment is fitting the crime, right? Punishment is fitting of the crime. The way she treated you, she will be treated. So rejoice, all right? Judgment is coming.
So Babylon was destroyed like that. I don't think there's still not a city or anything there. We don't. When Israel fell, or Jerusalem, they did rebuild there. And Rome, when it was taken over, it was rebuilt. So do you think there will be a final judgment on a certain place that?
So yeah, I think we have Babylon's spirit throughout history, and I think when John's talking, he's definitely talking about Rome, clearly throughout this. But I do think that there is that end time ultimate group, kind of like the man of lawlessness. Like his spirit is here. The Antichrist spirit is present in our world, but there is a sense that there is a final ultimate. And I think we could probably say that for this as well. I think that there are probably instances of Babylons that find destruction when they become hubris and idolatrous in the way that they treat people, especially God's people. Maybe we're living in one right now. So I'll just kind of leave it there. Yeah. Yeah, we do need to be careful. So, but I think also it could be, we could take it on a spiritual level as well, as far as if you go to Babylon today, there is a city there. It's just not called Babylon, and it doesn't have the control that Babylon had. And same thing with Rome. Like, yeah, there's a city there, but does it have the control that Rome had? Not at all. And I think we could definitely go in that route. Like a lot of these places that were the center of economic success and power that fell, probably because of their idolatry, they are not the economic centers that they once were. And I think that's what we need to be more worried about in our present context. And it's something I think that as Christians we should consider and call out and say, hey, this is not right. There's definitely, and again, it's the 7th now, so we have 4 weeks until we see the idolatry in all of our major companies come into play, right? Month of June, you should expect it.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yep. You will see idolatry at its finest. Yeah, it's in your book that he made him read. So we need to recognize it for what it is, right? Like, why do they all do it? Because if you don't, what happens? Economic disaster. In the opposite way, right? Yeah. So anyway, we have to call it out for what it is, and I think it is economic idolatry. So, and we have to be careful. June is Pride Month, and every major business will change their logo to be Pride, except in countries where homosexuality is outlawed, which is fascinating. Like, why would you do it if you really are supportive of this? Why wouldn't you do it in those countries? The only thing that I can see is that it's going to hurt your bottom line. Yeah, you're pandering to what's happening, and it's a very much a sign of how our economy is tied to our religion. And so anyway, I could talk for hours. I'm not going to. I don't have time for that. Man, I don't really have time for this. No, I'm not going to do a sermon about it later either. So thanks for the suggestion, though. So verse 21, I think, is the actual judgment. It definitely reflects Jeremiah 51:63. And Jeremiah 51:63, after Jeremiah has written this chapter on judgment of Babylon, he's told to wrap it up in a scroll and throw it into the Euphrates River. And so we see here something very similar, right? It takes a large millstone. He ties the scroll to a millstone, throws it into the river. And that's what seems to happen here. So it's still going off that Jeremiah passage. Then what we have in verses 21 to 23b is an explanation for the effects of the judgment. I don't know why I put that there, but it's fine. A lot of it reflects Ezekiel 26:12. It should be in the back of our minds already. We can also probably read Matthew 18:6 into this, where Jesus says, if you cause a little one to stumble, let a millstone be tied to you and you'd be thrown into a river. So judgment ideas in there. And so we see some of that. And I think what John is trying to say in these 21 is that we cannot be compromising with the world. Okay? Come out of her, throughout this whole thing, come out of her. All right? Don't be a part of her. It's not going to end well. And so what we have in 21 and 23 is a series of things that sound weird to our ears, but that are talking about ways in which Babylon has affected Christians in their economy. So we start off with these harpists, musicians, pipers, trumpeters. All right, who hires harpists, musicians, pipers, and trumpeters? So if I hire, if I hire musicians, all right, maybe throwing a party, but who hires musicians? When's the last time yes, thank you. When's the last time you hired a musician to come to a birthday party? Never did. Why not? Didn't have the money, right? It's a luxury item. Okay, so we have to kind of look at this. It's an economy of luxury in all of these items. Okay, and so again, we might also be discussing the power of the guilds, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and the idolatry associated with it. But definitely, this is an economy of luxury that's being talked about. The workers of trade and the sound of the millstone, that is definitely guild in mind. And for Christians who are unwilling to bow down to the idols of the guilds, they would have been excluded from these guilds and therefore excluded from being able to make money. So if you're not a part of the guild, you can't sell your silverware. You have to be a part of the guild to work with silver. You have to be a part of the guild to be a carpenter. You have to be a part of the guild to do anything. And if you're not a part of the guild, you can't do it. Okay? Like a union sometimes. Depends on the union. So, but usually our unions aren't saying, okay, now you need to worship this God on this day. So it's yes and no. Okay. Light of the lamp, wedding party, again, these things are there. And again, they are going to be luxury items. If you don't have enough money to buy oil for your lamp, that's a luxury item. You're just going to go around in the dark, right? If you don't have enough money to actually throw a wedding party, you're just going to do whatever you're doing, right? Like, and these are things that probably have affected the Christians, and is being, and when he brings them up in this judgment, he's saying how you've treated Christians is how you're going to be treated. You kept them from these luxury items, therefore you will be kept from them as well.
Is this where the 666 comes in?
No, we've already read that.
I know we've already read it.
I mean, to the extent that 666 is probably talking about economic choices and stuff, maybe. But I think it's not in John's mind when he's writing it. So again, I think we have just judgment. What Babylon did to God's people is going to be done to her. Lastly, it says there are 3 reasons why Babylon is judged. The first is that because their merchants were great or important people. That seems kind of weird to us, but there are some reasons for this. In Isaiah 23:8, a lot of the language is the same. And there it says, the merchants are princes, who traders are glorified in the earth. And so the problem with Babylon in Isaiah 23 is that they were glorifying themselves in the earth. And who alone is worthy of glory? God, right? And so I think that's part of the reason why they're judged here. The second one is that they led the nation astray by magics or pharmacies, for my pharmacist in the room. That's the Greek word for magics. The word is talking about idolatrous practices. So what they did in the idol worship itself were called by this word. And so that's what is happening here, is they're leading the nations astray by their idolatry. Lastly, it's because they persecuted God's people or God's saints or the holy people of God. And I think this is the big one. And so they persecuted either through execution or through economic crisis. So if you cannot work and cannot feed your family, that's an economic crisis and you die because you can't eat. All right, and so we need to recognize that that is a reality for people. Wealth, before we leave from this, I think we need to understand this. John is not calling wealth sinful. What he is calling is the attitudes that wealth has, can be, and usually is, depending on who it is. And so don't think that you can't have money or that you can't work to have more. That's not what's being said, but just be careful when you do. Why are you working for more? What do you do in order to gain more, right? That's more the bigger thing. Are you willing to bow down to idols in order to gain more? And that I think is a problem. All right, what can we learn?
Idolatry is for losers.
Idolatry is for losers. Okay, well, yeah, that's what I said, more or less. I said Babylon's judgment stems from her self-glorification that leads others into idolatry. So idolatry is for loser is the better way of saying that. So